Go ahead and call the meeting to order. We've got public comment, but we have no public at the moment. So we will move on. Agenda review. Does anybody have anything?
We have 5C for, of course, a floor scrubber for Josh.
Yep. And then I'm not sure if we were already planning on this or not, but there's a couple of non-publics.
Okay. What letters?
I don't know.
C?
I think so.
Say C.
C. That has to do with the emails we received. You know what I mean?
Okay, yep.
So C.
Yeah.
Anything else? All right. We've got 2 sets of minutes. Who wants to take action on those?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from October 1st and October 15th.
Thanks for a second.
I'll second them.
Any corrections or comments? Okay, then all in favor of approving the minutes of 10:1 and 10:15, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, we will move on to the business, which is first look at the big budget.
So just as to set the stage for you, I did put a budget in the drive so that you could look at it over the weekend. We weren't quite finished, but I thought it would be nice to give you an opportunity to at least start looking. I don't think we made a lot of changes. Amber's going to go over the differences between what we put in the drive and what she's presenting tonight. We decided the booklets can only make, I think, 60 pages, and the full packet is like 119 pages. So we chose not to copy that whole thing for you, so we just copied the budget, and the other documents are in the drive as a complete packet. If you want anything printed, I'm happy to bring it next meeting, or you can pick it up at the SAU, but a lot of it's stuff that you'll get in your budget binders, and we didn't want to waste paper if it wasn't necessary, so just it's all there for you to look at, but you'll just be, your handout is just the budget. And then Amber and Jess are both here. Amber will do an overall presentation, and then Jess is here to talk about all of your special ed numbers. So if there's any questions, I'll let them get started.
So I also gave little the summary I'm going to go over. I tried to break it out so that, obviously your budget is so large, to break it out and group it out, like I come every year by subsection, 1100, 1200, and so forth. So I'm just going to give you a summary of each of those sections, and after I finish the summary, I'll stop and let you process what I said, and then if you have any questions. The page numbers I'm going to be referring to are the ones that are pre in number. Okay? So I'll give you P numbers, line numbers. So the regular program, which is your 1100 counts, are going to be from page 3 to 17. There'll be lines 1 to 177. I sure do.
Amber, please. Amber.
Yeah, you have to really get close to the.
Your best friend.
Yeah, it's gonna be so close to you.
Can you hear me now?
It's gonna be like right up against your mouth.
I need it to
Like this.
You put it right there.
Oh, hello? Is it on now?
Yeah.
Blind as a bat. Okay, so the first section we're going to talk about is the 1100s, which is your regular programs. So that's going to be your teaching instruction. So in this section, it has gone up $556,000. What is captured in the 1100s, what is captured in those increases are CBA increases. We've added some additional days for learning, digital learning specialists. We needed to increase some funding for substitutes. We also added in 2 additional FTEs under the Ed Assistance, which is your regular Ed Assistance, to bring back the kindergarten aides. So that's about $54,000 for that. There is a decrease in English language learning services. And then of this section, it's about 105,000 of it are supplies, which you pretty much went over the last time you met. The only difference is there might have been some really small changes, and I also added a new account lines, 3 of them for the greenhouse. And we shifted 6,000 from the science line from PA to the greenhouse line for supplies. That was really the big change in that section.
Can I add a couple of things before you open questions for that section?
I have one more.
Oh, go ahead.
That's okay.
In that section, go ahead.
Yeah, and then the big increase is the replacement cycle, which is 254,000. Now that is one of the sections that we have the last couple of years have needed to deplete in order to, you know, make our budget cuts, which is one of the reasons why that's so high.
And that's basically, I was gonna discuss with you, the 10 additional days for digital learning specialists are days that they always work, but we've been able to pick it up the last few years in the ESSER grant. So we've been able to pay for those days. So there's gonna be several things in here that we'll keep referencing that we were able to pick up from the ESSER grant. You'll notice we talked about the 2 kindergarten ed assistants that we're adding back in. Those are the only positions at this point, I think, right? We didn't add any others yet. Those are the only 2 positions that we've put back in the budget. That's a conversation that we'll have to have, and looking at your bottom line, you'll see what has happened because we've lost ESSER and just the regular salary increases when we get down to that line. So the replacement cycle, we also were able to cover a lot of technology purchases from the ESSER grant. So that had to be added back in. So there are some pretty large increases both from technology and digital learning specialist days, and then adding the 2 positions back in. So that's a pretty substantive increase in that section. And then, like we've talked about, we ordered a lot of supplies from ESSER, and we've also cut every year. We've been cutting supplies and things that we haven't replaced for teachers. So we've got all of that in there. So we can take questions from that section if you have any.
Have there been thoughts of dipping into the technology trust fund to offset some of these costs for the replacement cycle and the equipment?
We have the warrant articles already actually drafted for you guys to go through and decide if you're going to add money, if you want to withdraw money. Traditionally, we had talked about using that trust for there was an emergency and we lost servers, but that's the conversation that you guys can certainly have about what you want to do with those trust funds.
Because I did see that there's a server listed for the hill school, and then obviously a ton of Chromebooks also listed for the hill school. So I'm just thinking, you know, we might
Absolutely.
suit us better to kind of try and pull from those. And then same thing for the supplies. Do we have a trust fund for that also?
You have instructional materials, I think it's called. So probably most of that would qualify.
And in their technology trust fund, it's about 38,000. Any other questions on that section? Okay, the next section is your 1200, which is your special education programs. This is going to be on pages 17 through 24, lines 178 to 269. The main drivers of this section are increases in teachers due to CBA. There's an increase there's a decrease in summer programs and an increase in contracted services and placements, which Jessica will go over in a second. And then there are some small increases in supplies and equipment, which is all specifically based on what needs the students that we know at this time. Jess, do you want to go into?
All right, so I handed. All right, in front of you, I handed out a budget items overview sheet. It's a back and front. There's a lot of information on there, but what it does is it breaks down each of the big special ed lines, except for your CBA lines. So the summer programming up top, it starts with, and then it breaks it down for Hill School, Three Rivers, and PA. And it'll give you the line number, the total amount in the lines, and then what is included within that line in your budget. So with the big one is increasing the lines for next school year is the contracted services. There's a small increase for Hill School, well, relatively small for special education, it's around 30,000. The big driver of the increases in contracted services is actually Three Rivers for next year, because right now they're having to contract out for a speech and language pathologist. They were not able to hire for an internal position that they have for an SLP who left this year. And so we were, because we were struggling to fill that, we had to contract out with an outside agency to fill that position, and it's considerably more than what it would be if we were able to hire our own person. So being unsure that we may or may not be able to fill that position next year again, because speech and language pathologists are hard to find, we are budgeting for the contracted services position again, hoping that we'll be able to hire an internal person, but knowing that that's the need that we have right now. So that's the big driver of the increases in there. EA's contracted services actually went down by about $12,000, and this is just reflective of student need. It's coming up through the ranks. Special placements, there's some significant movement within those lines. Hill School is having a pretty large reduction in their special placements line of about 285,000. Three Rivers has got an increase of around 200, and PA has an increase of around 400. Three Rivers increases are due to some student movements between placements and grades moving up. So that's the increase in there. The increase in PA is we have some students who are in need of transition services. So when I talk about transition services in special education, that's programming for when, after they complete their high school program, but we have them until they're 22. The laws that were adopted last year that we talked about, we now have to service students until they're 22 if they need that, if they're not getting their high school diplomas. So that increase includes some placement changes and a handful of transitional services for students. We'll talk about transportation after. Do you guys have questions? If there's a lot on that handout that I gave you, so if you do end up having questions, definitely reach out.
Jess, I think, I didn't.
I don't think I realized, if you budgeted for the speech and language as a contracted service, it's also in the roster as a position, so it should only be in one place. If you think that we're not gonna find someone and that we're gonna continue contracting, we can leave it here and then Amber can take it out of the roster.
Will that mess anything up for accounting for FTEs? Because it is a building position, it's not.
No, if we end up hiring someone, we could transfer money out of this line into the,
Okay.
or overexpend this one.
Yeah, I think we should keep it in contracted services.
Yeah, it really becomes an issue when it becomes a SB2 downs.
Yeah, we don't have a default, so.
Got it, yeah. Yeah, so I think that's safe then to take that out of the personnel line for special ed.
Okay.
And I would keep that in contracted services just because we've really struggled to fill speech and language pathologist positions for the last several years here. So I'm hopeful, but realistically not.
Okay, we'll leave it, we'll pull it from there, though, so that will be a reduction. Thank you.
There was also, from the last budget that was put in on Friday, there was another teacher position for special ed that was taken out as well. There were 7 FTEs, we reduced it down to 6 FTEs for Three Rivers, and then this changes will happen after the fact.
And I'm glad you mentioned that. That was the position we were unable to fill this year. So we made a staff switch internally to cover that, and after speaking with Jess and Katie, we decided to leave that position vacant. Make do with the staff we have.
What's your Jess so far?
So the African budget is by section. It's probably easier. Okay. Curious.
Fair.
I have just a couple questions, and I'm sure this has already been thought of, but no way we can get the SLP at Three Rivers to maybe sign on contract and hire them?
We have, there are non-compete clauses in all the contracted services, and typically it's like 2 years. They would have to leave, be gone for 2 years, and then apply.
I know we've done it before in
Yeah.
different schools, that's why I was asking.
Yeah, it's pretty strict.
I know. My other question was, I think it's on page 19, P19. I'm sure it's valid, but I know you can't give very many details. I was just questioning, it just says training needs of $70,000. Para training needs. But I didn't see anything in the handout, like, do
I
you,
think you,
am I looking at the wrong thing?
Yeah, that's-
Page 19,
yeah, that's a contracted service, and I think you're referencing.
training needs for paraprofessionals, 70,000. It's an increase of $70,000.
Look up. It's-
Oh, okay.
It's 2,000.
Okay, never mind. I was like, wow, okay, we're gonna have an extensive training.
No, I was thinking, that's a typo.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, now I got it.
I hate that.
Yeah, it's placed, unfortunately.
I did, I was like, what kind of training are we doing?
Spectacular training.
That's it, you guys are going easy on me today.
I'm just thinking. Oh, yeah.
I think it's just like, shock thing again.
Marinated.
Some of your lines did go down. So I will say it wasn't an increase across the board. There were some significant decreases as well, which is not always typical of special education. So
You're gonna do transportation too, right?
Yeah.
All right, the next section is your vocational programs, which is your 1,300. You're gonna find those from pages 24 to 28, lines 270 to 325. And that section's gone down by $2,088. No changes since we put it in there the last time we met with the principals and since Friday. Actually, I think I did make a change from since the principals. I think I made a change in the vocational tuition. I don't remember, I think Mike gave that to
Yeah, we
me.
haven't updated.
Yeah, so we received an updated figure for vocational tuition and it actually went down. I think it was like 70,000. So really the only increases in this is a decrease in teachers and then there's a slight increase in supplies and equipment. Any questions on those? The next section is going to be your co-curriculars, which is 1,400. It's going to be pages 28 through 30, lines 326 to 349. This is increasing by 14,811. There's a slight increase in co-curriculars. The increase that we're seeing for the athletic director, that's your pooled increases that you do at the end of the budget in your 2,900. So that's not an increase proposed for next year, but the increase is happening this year. And then there are some increases in supplies and equipment and awards.
I guess it's more of an ask, if you could, not immediately, but before we present to MBC at least, this is super helpful. Could you like each subheading, so it says like pages 24 through 28, the next line there where it tells what line it's on and it has the overall decrease for that decrease for that section. Could you add at the end of that line the percent increase or decrease? I think it's just, I look at 14,811 for an increase. I can figure that out in the budget, but somebody just looking at this is like, well, what was it last year? Was it $500 and it's increasing by 14,000, or was it 125,000 and it's only increasing? You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just for a little reference.
Yeah, that's not a problem. Any other questions on co-curriculars? Your next section is other support staff, which is your 2100s. They're going to be on pages 30 to 36, lines 350 to 435. So in this section, you're going to find your guidance and nurse. So there's a decrease in guidance salary that's due to personnel change, and then there are CBA increases. There's a slight decrease in supplies and equipment for guidance, a slight increase for assessment materials, an increase in nursing salaries again, so that's due to CBA, as well as requesting some additional days for hours for summer services for kindergarten screenings and the PYL.
We've been doing those for Master for the past few years. Another spot.
And then slight increase in supplies. So this section's increasing by 10,400. Any questions there? The next section is instructional service, which is your 2200s, pages 36 to 42. Lines 436 to 518. So in this section is going to be your library section. And so in this, there's an increase in library salaries. Again, that's due to personnel change. There's also an increase in staff course reimbursement, and that's because there was an increase in the CBA for next year. And then there's a slight increase in supplies, books, and equipment. And the increase for that section is $24,956.
On the, so on line 457, so for 10 additional days for summer work, that's $10,000?
No, there was also personnel change. So the salary for that individual was higher than what
The previous librarian was being paid.
correct. And then in addition, and that is all broken out for you in the roster. It's from the job.
I have an even more basic question. This is just for my own clarification. When we see things, and I realize this is a snapshot, which is very helpful, as Andy was pointing out, but when we see salaries due to change in personnel and CBA or CBA or whatever, am I to assume that the salary change attached to personnel is not a CBA item, but something else? If like it wouldn't be CBA unless you specifically denote that it's covered under the CBA. So, for instance, the librarian
Yep.
point, right? There's an increase due to change in personnel, and then an increase coursework per CBA. I just want to make sure that we don't conflate two things in our minds that should not be conflated as the same thing.
Well, it potentially could be the same thing, because if that person is in a position this year, the CBA would relate to next year.
Okay, but you would note that though. It would,
It would-
right. I guess I'm wondering where it says salaries change due to personnel, but it does not say due to CBA.
Any salary
It's not.
is in the CBA. So any teacher salary.
That's kind of what I want to make sure we're clear about.
Yes.
We start circulating this, I want to make sure that we know exactly that. Thank you.
Right, so I want to make sure I'm on the same wavelength as you, but so where it says the salary change due to personnel could be, we had a nurse for 15 years that left. We hired a nurse that's fresh out of college, so they're making significantly less. So still both, one was under the CBA last year, the new one's going to be under the CBA, but the difference between the 2 years is because of personnel change.
Yeah, I'm just wondering why sometimes it says per CPA and sometimes it does not.
That's my own,
Okay,
I will make sure to add there.
Okay. okay.
Certified.
I wouldn't want somebody to wonder, as I did,
I
is
just,
is this outside the CPA, right?
yeah,
That's
I
what
don't
I'm going
think that
on.
we need to even say C per the CBA. I'm wondering if we do. We can both work on that.
Any other questions on that section? The next section is your 2,300 accounts. This is on page 42 to 45. This whole section is new. None of this was in your budget last time. So I've added all of these. These are your school board services. So in this section, it has really the increases were dues, the dues for the teacher association. Yeah, what Patty said. Increased by 5%. So that increase has been in here. I did decrease the treasurer supply line because there really are no supplies. We've moved to fully electronic. So I've taken that out and I think I just put $1 on that line because we really don't need it. Legal notices, we increased that because the cost of those is up slightly. In this section is also the audit and actuary services. On page 45, I've increased your attorney fees, and that, it's a discussion that you might want to have, but looking back on what's been occurring, it looks like you need additional dollars for that. But again, if you choose to lower it, you can. I just increased it to cover the cost. And then the district assessment, which is what is SAU 53, which is line 562, 563, and 564. The share for the SAU services is 38.8. That section is going up by 41,856. Any questions there?
I know we brought this up at exec board, but I didn't know where we were at with the treasurer's salary. Is that something that we're gonna handle individual boards? Okay, so that's something that we can discuss. Okay, thank you.
I had a quick one, and it probably doesn't make a lot of difference one way or the other, but I thought the district our 38.8% share was down from previous years.
And so it is in the drive for you, but I can tell you what it was. So last year, or this current year, it was 40.3. And now it's at 38.8.
Okay.
So while the percentage has kind of gone down a little bit, the valuation is actually what's high.
Okay.
So valuation for the current year is 1.1 million. Valuation for next year is 1.2 million, and that's derived by the department.
Right. Okay. I just wanted to clarify that.
Any other questions there? And I just want to mention I did not make a change for that treasurer salary. I know we talked about it. Not to say you can't, but I just wanted to let you know for Pembroke that I had changed. You're welcome. All right, your next section is going to be your 2,400, which is administrative services, which is page 46 to 53, lines 565 to 645. This section's increasing by $46,030. This is due to the increases again that the school board approved for this fiscal year, is showing here where they were pooled in the 2,900. We also needed to add in some OT hours for our technology staff. The reason for that being is there was a recent labor law change where only certain individuals could be salaried staff. The individuals that we have in that department are currently salaried, and we need to move them to hourly. Because of that, they're most likely going to need overtime in order to get summer work done and things like that. So we budgeted hours for that. There's a decrease in the maintenance cost, the software, that is the programs that I talk about at the OSA board, where our director of IT bulk swaps and then distributes out our school district based on utilization of that school. There's a slight increase in internet cost. There's an increase in postage costs, decrease in travel, and slight increase in graduation costs. Any questions on that?
Just looking at the increase in graduation costs, I seem to remember that it was less expensive for us to hold graduation at South Density Stadium versus here. Is that correct?
That's
still true.
Initially, that was true. I think one significant change is they have started billing us for the rain day because they can't, so because they can't book anything on that day. It's not the same as twice the cost, but you incur that additional cost. So I would say we're probably a hair over what we were paying to have it here. But the feedback we consistently get is the parking is a lot better. You can hear, and the chuckle sounds helpful too.
And last time we did it here was 5-6 years ago, so that cost is probably significantly higher.
Right.
The tent and the chairs and the setup is gonna be significantly higher, so that hasn't been priced for years.
Yeah.
If that was priced and would be, that's gonna be drastic at this point in time.
Thank you.
You'd have it your house.
That'd be your house.
Your fielding.
That happened moment.
Any other questions on that section? All right, the next section is maintenance and operations, which is your 2600 account. That's going to be on page 53 to 59, line 646 to 735. In this section, you have an increase in custodians. That again is due to the increases that were prior approved. There is a decrease in utilities, slight increase in supplies, slight increase, and actually there's an slight increase in contracted services. The liability insurance over the last couple of years, which is your property and liability insurance, has been increasing. I have it in here about 8% increase. We don't actually have the rate right now because they don't get quotes on that. But when I look back at the average, it's been between 6 to 8% increase. And then there are some maintenance contracts in here, projects. So this section's going up by $194,461. Of that, $144,997 is the maintenance projects. So the projects that Josh is looking to do is at the Hill School, he's looking to do some tree removal services and classroom cabinets for the six.
Can you reference the line in the budget?
10.
708, right? 708, just I want to go. Yep, so.
So 708, 709, and 710. Then for Three Rivers, there's again removal of dead trees, bathroom countertop replacement, and then the dugout roofs for the softball and baseball. At Pembroke Academy, again, removal of dead trees. There's some asbestos abatements, masonry painting and repairs, bathroom countertop replacement, and then some AC lights.
Josh is here.
Josh, can you give a little bit of context to the classroom cabinets for sinks? Because if I'm remembering correctly, each classroom has a sink, and isn't there a cabinet that the sink sits on?
Yes, so.
Replacing those.
Yeah, so we would start replacing those. It's been something On the maintenance end, we kind of have deferred over the last umpteen years, and at this point in time, specifically in the older wings, we need to start coming up with a replacement because they've been patched, they've been pieced together for years. And it would also help give them hopefully some storage that they're in dire need of in that area.
And then the dugout roofs at TRS, is that something that we've been putting off or is that something new?
No, so that's been dropped from the budget over the last 3 or 4 years. We had planned to remove them and then rebuild them. The rebuilding part hasn't made it through the final cut over the last, again, 3, 4, 5 years. We did take and remove the roof structures this past summer out of necessity. They were legitimately being held up by fences. They were one windstorm, one rainstorm away. So we felt we had to. And on top of that, in regards to that, we actually got help from VJ Ramphis in the town, the DPW director, who came down and helped assisted us with that. And it cost me a coffee.
I like that price. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions on that section? All right, the next section is transportation, which is on page 59 to 61. Line 736 to 752. This section's increasing by 147,174. So this is your yearly increase for your bus contract as well as McKinney-Vento. And then there is special ed transportation in this section, which Jess will go over.
All right, so first I want to hit McKinney-Vento. Your costs for McKinney-Vento are staying pretty stable. There is about $2,000 increase per building to maintain those transportation levels. You guys do have a pretty steady stream of kids in need of transportation who qualify for McKinney-Vento, and that includes foster care as well. For transportation for special education, your lines are going down in each of the summer lines. Hill School is down around 25,000. Three Rivers is down around 6, and PA is down around 25 as well. And that's just based on student need. And my admin assistant's done a really good job of trying to double up in ride share as much as possible over the last year. And we are starting to see transportation companies come down in price and have a little bit of market competition. We've been able to negotiate prices down a few times this year with vendors, so that's been a relief as well. Where special education transportation is going up is in the regular line, so that's 2722, 519. Which is line 745, 745, 746, and 747 in your budget packet. So 746 and 747 are the two lines that are going up, and that is just based on where students are going for out-of-district placements and the needs, and whether we were or were not able to do a ride share, or if somebody needs an aid on the bus due to safety. That has an impact of those costs as well.
This might not be something that you can answer, but I know you'll do your best. What is the reasoning for the huge difference between the, say, TRS and the high school? The increase, such a huge increase difference? Is it because people are going farther or we have more? Because I see, if I'm looking at the right thing, line 747 says that there's an increase of 137,000. And then like for TRS, the line above it, 746 is 33,000. So what causes such a huge difference? I mean, I think I know the answer, but I just kind of would like to.
Yep, it's because it's student specific. I mean, you hit it right on the head, Gary. It really is distance and placements. The programs that I talked to you about during the placement conversation with the transition programs for our kids, we have several transition programs in place for next school year that are going to be needed for those kids who are between 18 and 22. And those kids will need transportation to those programs. So there are several programs throughout the state that we may utilize for students in that situation, or we may do our own building-based transition program. It just depends on the student's needs and the type of services that that child would need. So if we have somebody out in the community, but we're not necessarily able to provide a coordinator or voc assistant to go vocational rehabilitation assistant to go out and help them with that job or internship, we may have to hire out for that. Or there are programs that will help us do that kind of programming for kids. So we try to do that in-house as much as possible, but there's just sometimes we just can't.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for transportation?
I think it's just a typo and I crossed it off, but on this thing,
I know that didn't, so let me do
it says decrease in summer special ed, increase in summer special ed.
Oh.
But that's general placements or like some, or
School year.
is it just like regular special?
Yeah, special education is.
Yeah.
I should have didn't cross out one summer.
That's what.
Yeah, that's supposed to be an increase in school year.
I copy and paste down below because I knew I needed to, didn't take out summer on the second one.
Yes, I think one thing moving forward, and the NBC may want you to have you come in again this year, and then also the public hearing and the town meeting. I don't think many people outside of this group know that students go from 18 to 22 in addition to what comes before them. So I think that's something that we need to make sure we get out. I'll do what I can at meetings and everything, but it's something that, you should reinforce at those presentations and meetings, so.
I'll make sure that I do that. I think, and that kind of reminds me, I had done a presentation over in Deerfield regarding special education. So if you guys are all ever interested in that, just putting it out there, I don't know how that may be best utilized, but I'm happy to do a walkthrough of special education spending, budgeting, what it all costs. It was well received over in Deerfield, so happy to do it for Pembroke as well.
Yeah.
Just let me know when that might be appropriate in the forum.
I think you've done it like the last 2 years anyway for NBC. And I think maybe one new member on NBC, so they may or may not, so, but we'll put it up there anyways.
Okay, we'll do.
Jess, it's a different presentation though than what you've previously done. So maybe is that something that we could, I don't want to say necessarily a public meeting, just get it out there that we're gonna have you do that presentation.
Yeah, any way that you think would be appropriate for me to do that, I'm happy to do it. If it's just at a school board meeting or at the NBC meeting, I'm fine to do it, or a public meeting, it doesn't matter to me.
I was thinking, after we turn the budget over to the NBC, your next few meetings are gonna be getting the budget done, but once we turn it over, we have a good couple of months before it actually gets voted on in March, and I think it would make sense for you to come to one of those meetings. And what we did in Deerfield, we advertised it as a public forum, we tried to get people to come to listen, and people did watch the recording after, and it was very well received, and it was very specific to Deerfield. So Jess would put your numbers in, and it would be specific to you, so I think it's probably worthwhile.
I covered like reimbursements, things like that, and like really walked through how funding is done throughout the state for special education and for the local district.
So it's something different than you've done in the past.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's way more detailed and like intimate for that school district. So it was, like Patty said, it was full of like Deerfield's actual numbers how much reimbursements they've gotten, Medicaid, it had to do with the percentage of special education, where that's all kind of divvied out, the types of disabilities or services that might go along with certain disabilities. So it really, and I didn't get any hate mail, so it's fine. Yeah.
So the next section is your benefits. On page 62 to 65, these are your 2,900 accounts. Line 754 to 792. This section's going up by 468,554. This section will decrease as well when I take that position out. But we do have health insurance numbers. They actually came in early this year. They came in on the 5th, and they don't normally come in until like the 9th or the 12th. So the health insurance for certified staff is going up 10.8, and for support staff, it's 7.6. I know that sounds very large. With that said, I think I mentioned this last year as well. Health Trust last year, we used school care, but Health Trust went up about 20 to 30% last year for their services. And we went up, I think our highest was 10% for our SAU, and I don't even think we got there. I think maybe it was 9. This year, we heard again, Health Trust was going up another 15 to 25%. So while ours is going up pretty significantly, Health Trust is still much higher than school.
I think it's worth mentioning too, though, that Pembroke's is the highest of any of our districts. We have districts in the 5% range and districts in the 7% range. And it is, just in case people see those numbers and you get questions, everyone is in a risk pool. So the increases are based on usage. So that just means we have a lot more employees in Pembroke, and there were probably, some significant health needs or specialty care that was needed. So your rates are dependent on the types of uses that your insurance gets. So that's why yours was a little higher than everyone else.
And then dental insurance is going up 5%, which is high. For several years, it was 0, and then it started going up 2%, 3%. I think last year was 4%. This year, it's 5%. That isn't an estimate. That is the actual increase. So these two sections also include any personnel changes that have happened, as well as any plan changes. By plan changes, I mean you have a single person that gets married and now they become a 2-person, or you have a 2-person and then they have a baby and now you've got a family plan, and vice versa. Family plan could go down to a 2-person, or a 2-person go down to a single. So those are the type of changes I'm talking about when I say plan change. The two big changes in this area are the New Hampshire retirement. Certified staff the percentage is going from 19.64 down to 19.23. So it's actually going down. The non-certified staff is also going down. It's going from 13.53 to 12.75. So we are seeing some savings in that. And then we have added in the very bottom on the 2,900 section, we have added in the proposed salary increases, which I will go over with you. We did add those in so that we had it in the bottom line. So what Patty is recommending, it has been added in. Those, for those that are new, that's the section I referred to early on when I said, oh, it was told at the end. Any questions on those benefits? Again, that section will change. It will decrease once I take the position out.
I just lately are looking at this.
If people are looking at the increases, they're not necessarily by school. So there's a pool of money, and it's all at PA, but it's not all PA staff. So I don't want people thinking that no one else is getting an increase and everyone at PA is getting the whole pool. That's not the way it was entered in the budget, just so you know.
It's all for Dan.
All right, the next section is page 65. You're right at the bottom of that page is your capital reserve and expendable trust. You'll notice those are zero, because nothing gets voted in there until afterwards. Those are probably like the one articles and stuff.
Yeah, no. Sorry, just while we're there. The master ed lines too for 790, 791, and 792. We plugged in some retirement numbers as placeholders, but we are still accepting retirement applications until December 1st, so those could change, but we wanted to make sure there was money set aside in the budget for those so that you can see the actual numbers. But we haven't made those decisions yet, and those numbers are next to schools that may not have retirees.
On the next page is your lease purchase. That's going up by $326. One of your leases is actually the 25-26 year will be ending. I do have that in the budget packet online. It is in there. So the only lease purchasing that will be remaining is the Honeywell project. So you'll start to see some savings the following year in regards to that. On the same page, on page 66 is your food service line, food service transfer line, that's 803. That's increasing by 5,000. Some of that has to do with the fact that we have to create a spend down plan every year for the food service program. The food service program does have a surplus in that program, but we need to utilize it. So that program has increased, and some of it is because of the health benefits, the biggest driver of that program, which you'll see in a second. That budget is also in the drive in that packet. It's not in this one, but it is in the drive. But that's the biggest reason for the increase in that food service budget. So in a couple years, the amount that's in this line is most likely going to be going up. And the reason why I say that is right now they have a pretty significant surplus in their food service program, but a lot of that has to do with COVID years. So during COVID time, they received a lot of federal and state aid that they wouldn't typically get. And because of that, that money's kind of been sitting there. And we've been utilizing it year after year to lower the food costs for that program. But that program is not sustainable on its own. If you look at just the operational side for staff, it outweighs any revenue that, not any, but a lot of the revenue that comes in. So, but for now, we're looking to cover about $10,000 of that cost of that program. With that said, some of that $10,000 also includes uncollected debt. You do not have $10,000 worth of uncollected debt, but should any uncollected debt occur in the food service program, it cannot be paid by any revenue received to the food service program. It has to be paid by operating dollars. So we always usually account for about $5,000, and we never even come close to that. Some actually last year I think we had that. So it's been very, very minimal. A lot of times, a lot of the districts these days have actually been getting donations to cover those costs, which has been good. Not all districts, but some of our districts. On that same page right below, on lines 804 and 805, that's your transfer to capital reserves and expendable trust. There won't be anything in those lines until after March, after the vote. After the budget, if you have any warrant articles that are money's being put into trust, that's where that would go. But we wouldn't add it to the budget until after it's been voted. Shifted. On line 806, that's your grant expenditure. This line, we're anticipating a slightly less amount of grants coming through. This line is 100% covered by revenue. It nets to zero. Every dollar spent is revenue is received. The next line is on page 67, which is your food service program. That's line 807. That's the program I was just talking about. As you'll notice, there's $118,000 increase. I believe off the top of my head, I think it's like 67,000 of that was health benefits. Which is the biggest driver for that. There was also a salary increase. We did put in a proposed increase for them as well. So that's in there. And then the rest is just the regular increase to supplies. As you know, the cost of food supplies has kind of gone through the roof. So she's accounted for any increases in that. If she does not spend it, it obviously does not get spent. Any dollars not spent then goes back to that person. Any questions on any of that? I did want to note that while this budget's, $2,338,754 increase, of that, 1.9 is the actual operating expense. Because in the total, it takes into consideration grants, and the food service program, which is pretty much 100% covered by other.
Any questions?
It's a lot to share.
Can I just mention, our work with this budget? So, it's always a dance because we don't have the bottom line when the buildings are working on our budget. So we really brought to you, but this is really a first round. So we didn't make significant cuts to our proposed building lines because we didn't know what the increase was. So we put in for what we needed, what we thought was reasonable. Amber puts in all the rest, and we see this bottom line number. So I don't, the building administrators were not irresponsible by any stretch, and they really put things in that they needed and have been cut. We didn't know what the bottom number was going to look like. So we obviously have a lot of work to do and a lot of discussions. You have very few budget meetings, which makes for a lot of work. You have one next week, and then you've got 2 in December on the 3rd and the 17th, and the NBC is supposed to receive it on the 19th. So we'll just have to kind of strategize on how to attack this.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's same thing every year. But my first gut reaction to this is that, we're talking about 1.9 million, and 1.2 million of that is just special education and benefits that are contractual. Can't do anything about it. So, I mean, as usual, we're not gonna have a whole lot of room to take stuff out of this.
Yeah, 700,000 of that special loan, not including transportation.
Yeah, it was like 860 something when I added it. It's really frustrating to have lost so much and lost so many people. And we didn't even put, all we put back in was 2 kindergarten pairs. And it's still up this much. It's just, it's hard to wrap your head around. And we are right there with you.
The one thing that I wanted to ask for, and I'd love to say for the first December meeting, but if that's not realistic, that's okay. We talked about it this spring, but whatever you can come up with for, I'll call it a cut impact sheet. And the positions that we got rid of, what shuffles happened, what programs we lost, dollar amounts attached to the positions as much as possible. I think it's gonna be really important to show people what last year actually looked, what this year looks like due to what happened last year before they decide if they're going to try to do that to us again.
I'll put the, we did have to do a final cut sheet to get to that $3 million reduction. Amber did that, and we I think we posted it, so I'll resurrect that and put it in your drive. And you can take a look and let me know if you want us to, what you want us to add for notes or more detail, if that works.
Yeah.
Can I make a pitch for us at least to think about the opposite of that? Sure. I want that, certainly. I can work on that. I appreciate the severe fiscal responsibility. And I think everyone's trying to make everyone's job a little bit easier here. I would like us to just at least think about what it looks like to restore what we have. Make these people's lives a little bit easier and put them back in a better position to do their jobs. I'm not saying that we would get it, but I think it would be good to show people what it would look like to restore what we lost and then fund just the general increases that we currently have. Not saying again that we vote that particular kind of budget forward, but I do think that I'd rather approach this from a stance of not crouching down in defense against a storm that we think might be coming, but instead taking a little bit more of an affirmative approach to this. I think our students probably deserve that.
Pete?
Is there a way to know, or do any of these increases have to do with the cuts that were made last year? That's, something that I kind of was thinking about. I know some of them is contractual, such like speech path and things like that, but I mean, where along, that's one. Are there more?
We can take a shot at that. Anecdotally over the past, 5 years probably at least, we go back and cut and cut and cut. And we've tried to save positions by, okay, science class, you don't get new textbooks. Okay, we're gonna level fund our building supplies. So we've been doing that for 5 years, and that's not a lot of money, but over time, now it is a big, and yeah, Josh's stuff, we tore down the cover on the dugouts, we have no roof on the dugouts. So all of those things have been a slow build over the past several years that I know you guys have been here and watched all the little cuts that now we're at this critical point where things are falling apart, things are no longer sustainable, and now we're adding things back in.
Patty, just to add a little bit to that, I don't know that we're going to feel the full repercussion of last year's cuts until the end of this year. I think we have a lot of educators that are really exhausted already, and may choose not to come back because they're overburdened. So we may not even feel the impact of personnel, let alone the building structures, but personnel, we may not even know what kind of storm we're in. Alluding to what you said, Ken, until the end of this year, and then we can't even plan for that now for next year's budget.
Yeah, you're right.
Right.
That's another thing on that cover sheet, is we don't want names obviously, but I think we should be able to quantify. We have a rough idea that 4 people left because.
Yes.
One of the other things to think about too is, while last year when we were making cuts, there are some things we were able to get either last year or this year, or prior years, because there were grant funding. So anytime there's extra funding, it's always wonderful. But when that ends, the sustainability of those plans becomes dramatic, right? And so that's why when you look at like the technology replacement plan, that's dramatic to this budget, but that's because we've been using other sources. And at some point, those other sources run out. But we can't not have those things because we need those things. So that's something I think that's really important. I always say, it's so great to get money, but what's the sustainability of this to move it forward?
Tom Seraphin talked about this years ago. Everything you add into the budget, aside from personnel, the computers. That's something, you get a grant for it, it's great, but what happens in 5 or 10 years when that money runs out? That's something we want to follow on. Which brings me back to the other statement I was going to make concerning technology, concerning the, Chromebooks, yeah. You know, at this point in time, you know, they stay at Hill School, they pretty much stay at TRF, but they go home with the students at PA, and then when those seniors leave, off they go with them. I know those things are 4 years old, maybe some less, but they're pretty much all 4 years old at that point in time. And I don't know what the impact would be on the budget if those seniors didn't go home with them when they graduated. And the other side of it, and I don't know if this is unusual here, but I've talked to a few other people and told them, yeah, all the students at the high school have their own Chromebooks, and when they leave, they go with them. They're like, you know, we had to buy ours, or, you know, and then there's like a program for those people who couldn't afford them, that, you know, kind of like a scholarship thing, you know, that they got provided for them based on needs, so on and so forth. And maybe that's something we gotta start looking at. And I don't know what the law states in New Hampshire, if we have to provide them, or based on need, we can supply some and everybody buys their own, and once they get to the high school. So that was something else that,
The seniors do return them.
oh, I thought they went off with them.
They do return them.
Okay.
And the reason I know that is I have to list up the names at grad practice every year. So, to include the chargers.
Right, okay.
To be perfectly honest, they become loaners that we use throughout the building. There are a lot of miles on them.
Right.
And they get to a point where, like, they're like 1 year removed from end of life, where, you know, we can't update them to the degree that we need to update them. One challenge that I know would be pretty significant from an infrastructure point of view is having the school provide the device allows them to be on the school-owned Wi-Fi. And if we, because there are students, upperclassmen particularly, who have jobs and are getting ready for college, that have their own devices that are frankly probably superior to the Chromebooks they got freshman year. But we can't let those onto a school-owned Wi-Fi.
I understand that, yeah.
So that's part of that.
And again, the senior ones, I was basically the loaner thing or recycling.
Yeah, oh yeah, and they'll use the keyboards if they can for,
Yeah.
you know, replace, they cannibalize those things going on.
I just had a quick comment, not that I want to give us more work to do, but and we have a meeting next week, and then the holidays go really, really fast. So I think next week, in my opinion, I think it would be awesome if we could choose a day in January where maybe Jess could give that presentation and we have enough time to advertise it, because I really do think we need to have a public meeting and really push it out with one call now, whatever it is. We are gonna talk about our budget, and this is what special ed, she can do all our details, because I think we really need to do that this year. Because the increase is so much special. I don't know, but the increase is so much special ed.
Or 3.
We cut an awful lot last year. There's nowhere to cut. Like, we have to make sure and prevent, yeah.
Yeah, and that's, you know, when I was going, after you called me,
I'm sorry, but there's 40.
I waited 24 hours and then I went looked at it. I'm looking at it and going like, if we have to reduce it, it all comes from the 1100 lines. And there's no room to reduce those lines anymore. That's why I started thinking about the Chromebooks, you know, things like that. You know, it's.
We did cut some stuff from special ed last year, but I don't think we have any more wiggle.
Yeah, and that, and to our detriment,
Yeah.
we did cut stuff, because now, you know, I've already had a statement, well, they said they couldn't touch special ed and they did. You know, that kind of thing. Yeah, so that's, I'm not saying it's just our, but, you know, we were able to do something in that area because we had to. And that was what prompted my question about, you know, increased costs because of the cut last year. You know, what's the impact? At this
I
point in
think,
time.
The special eds, just to circle back a little bit to that, we, some of it is taking risks and thinking like, okay, I think we'll be okay. I think that student's gonna be okay. So there is always that give and take in that area. We also have worked really hard. Just the minute she submits these numbers, she's updating them. So anytime there's a change, she'll come back to us and say, oh, this student moved, so we're gonna take this placement out, or, oh my gosh, we had a student move in, we've gotta add more money. So that's constant right up until March to try to keep these numbers current. And to Jess's other point about losing staff, we may have cut a case manager at Three Rivers, and it may be easy for people to say, see, you could have done without less, but that is an incredible burden on the staff that are left behind in the special ed department, and I don't know what that's gonna look like. So there's give and take with all of the special ed numbers.
Well, just to put it out there, you're handling some of that responsibility now, right? At TRS with the special ed, or initially going into it and everything?
There was more work at the beginning, but we,
Yeah.
it's the in-house team that's picking up that.
Right.
And so it is a much greater burden on
Yeah,
those teachers in that building, which is the trickle down effect. Like, it makes me worry for the end of this year, who's not coming back and who we may not be able to fill. Like, will we be in a situation next year where we have to contract a special ed teacher in from an outside agency because we can't fill a position because that caseload's too big or the needs are too heavy? That would be a really unfortunate position to be in, to have a contract special ed teacher though.
And to Jean's point, it would cost us more.
Yeah.
we already have an opening for next year with the retirement that we're worried about filling. We
Any other comments on the budget tonight? Okay, I just wanted to say quick, because I don't think I said it yet, I want to thank Amber very much. Our numbers were in super early this year, tax rate was set super early, everybody was happy. That was great to have everything done. Appreciate it.
and I was sure to inform, August 28th was the date, and I was sure to inform the NBC of that date.
Yeah.
So,
Yes, we actually got in almost everyone except for one district, and that one district was not because of our office, so it was great. We worked out really well this year.
couldn't guess what that district is, you know.
It was not your district.
All right, I guess we can move on then to 5B, which is the revision and energy contract.
So I spoke to Dean had given his opinion that the contract was ready to go, and Jean had still been working with the energy committee, so we held off on the official vote to sign the contract. I touched base with Jean, and I believe that we are all set, correct?
Yeah.
So, if we could take that official action, and then I can get that signed and back to, revision energy.
Yeah, just to inform everyone else a bit, get the acronym wrong, it's like CPCNH, I think, Main Power Coalition, yeah. CPCNH is probably at least a year out on their numbers, and compare, so they can't even compare the revision right now because they don't have the numbers in. So, that's why they said, yeah, and go for it. And there's I think a 1 year opt out,
Yeah.
if I remember correctly. So that gives us plenty of time
Yeah.
to move with that.
Cool. You want me to-
I make a motion to approve the revision energy contract.
Or second? Any other questions, discussions, comments on this one before we move forward? All right, all in favor of approving the revision energy contract, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Cool, let's try to work on that, Gene.
I was on a phone call driving down the road.
I mean, hey, it's more than I did. All right, we added 5C to discuss a floor scrubber. I'm guessing that's Mr. Powell.
It's not me.
That would be
Nothing.
my floor scrubber.
Oh, man. I can't wait to see Jerry.
We're very fortunate to have that floor scrubber. So here to talk about the floor scrubber at Three Rivers. It's an identified item on the capital improvement plan. It's in need of replacement. We've put significant money into it over the last 2 or 3 years. It's a 2004. We usually, or at this point in time, we plan a 10-year replacement. This is an example of if we can go further than 10 years, we're going to go as far as we can. So again, it's a 2004. The floor scrubber was tagged for $20,000 on the CIP. We actually are coming in way lower because we downsized it. The size of the floor scrubber we have at Three Rivers would be more suited for a Pembroke Academy, and doesn't need to be that big at Three Rivers. So with that, we priced out with Jerry and went and saw with Jerry, just to give him his kudos, 4 different machines. So we saw a Trident from Hilliard, which came in at $18,490.40. Minuteman from WB Mason, which came in at $11,500. An IPC Eagle from Al's Custodial, which came in at $13,900. And a Viper from Al's Custodial, which came in at $13,700. I would ask that we go with the Viper from Al's Custodial for $13,700. Twofold on this, we have a Viper here at Pembroke Academy we've been very satisfied with. That will be coming up in a couple of years, I believe. But that machine has served us well. We know what we get with it. And we would look and we try to match up the types of brands if possible for ease of maintenance on the long term. So that would match that up. And then just a little bit about Al's Custodial. He's a local guy in the state. He's going to be there to fix it should we not be able to fix it, specifically when it's out of warranty. He's not, and nothing against the big companies, we use them often, but we won't just be a number or a check on the board with him. He'll be a phone call away, and we find that to be very, very important. So with your recommendation, I would ask that we go after the Viper floor scrubber from Al's Custodial.
Cool. Thanks for getting multiple bids, prices and quotes. Questions for Josh? And do we need to name the cost?
No, because you're letting purchase and then we'll have to go here. Yep.
Make a motion to approve the purchase of the Viper floor scrubber for $13,700 from Al's Custodial.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Well,
It sounds like a cool name.
I was gonna say the same thing. Well, let's call for questions.
Volunteer to use it sometime.
No.
She's on the insurance.
Nobody else.
Questions, comments? All in favor of the approval of the purchase for $13,700 of the Viper from Al's Custodial, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right,
Thank you.
thank you. We still don't have any public, so unless anybody has anything else,
That you would need for non-public.
we sure do. Good. I don't. You need to stay.
I got safety and you guys are, thanks.
All right, the board has you go into non-public session in accordance with New Hampshire RSA 91-8.